We've got, as always, a pretty full agenda this morning. Are we broadcasting yet?
Yes.
Broadcasting.
Yes, we are.
It's live. It's live. Okay.
It's now live.
Fantastic. So, and welcome to anybody that's coming in over the webinar. So, just the usual reminders, please. If you're not speaking, if you wouldn't mind muting your phone, your microphone to stop any feedback. Entirely up to you whether you wish to leave your camera on or off. If you're having broadband connection problems, then try switching off the video. That sometimes helps and so on. So there is a raise hand facility. So please do use that. Or if you can't, for whatever reason, then put something in the chat. If you can't do that, then just wave your hands wildly and hopefully somebody will see you. Okay, so we've got apologies from Veronica Moore, Katie Stewart, and Councillor Matt Furness. I don't think there are any others other than that. So good. Okay. So we'll just that you've all got the papers and hopefully had a chance to read them and digest them. There is, just for information again, the vision statement, which is an important document, and we need to keep coming back to that to remind ourselves, what it is we're trying to achieve here. So I'm aware that we've there have been, as ever, sort of conversations and discussions outside of this meeting in the run-up to the meeting, and I hope that during the course of the agenda we will pick up those issues that have been raised. Is there anything before we do that? Does anybody have any other business that they want to raise, anything under that, or anything else before we launch into the detailed agenda?
I'd just like to say, because I'm sure it's of interest, the island on Castle Street is being reinstalled tomorrow evening.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much. And so I've just seen in the chat that Katie Stewart is with us. So apologies for that, Katie. Okay. Should we then move to item 2, which are the minutes of the previous meeting and any actions arising from those? Are there any comments, inaccuracies that anybody picked up on the minutes, or those? Can we agree those? If I don't see any hands up, then I will assume those are agreed. Thank you very much. I don't think there are any matters arising that we won't pick up as part of the rest of the agenda. So we'll move to item 3, questions. Any questions from the public? I don't believe we've received any. Simon, is that right?
That's right, yeah, none that warrant raising at the board. We've clearly had correspondence as usual, but we've been dealing with that as business as usual. Yeah.
Okay, perfect, thank you. Moving on then, item 4, which is the Optimised Infrastructure Plan Consultation Report. I think, Ben, you're going to lead on this.
Are you on, Ben?
Sorry, thought I'd done that. Just to introduce myself, I'm Ben Fanning. I work in the communications team at the County Council, and I support the Farnham project, and I work alongside colleagues at Waverley and Farnham to help deliver that. The report that I'm just going to be presenting today was pulled together by colleagues in the Council's Resident Insights team. So they did all the analysis on that. And I work quite closely with them as we develop the OIP, and they've got all the expertise in the analysis. I'm hoping you've all had a chance to read the report, so I'm not going to sort of talk about it in huge depth today, but I wanted to just give a bit of background for the new members just so they knew what we did. So we can move on to the next slide, please. Just to sort of cover this quite quickly, the consultation was open for a month from mid-February. People in and around the town could comment via the Commonplace engagement platform. They could also request paper questionnaires. We also ran 3 local liaison forums and 1 Facebook Live. And we encouraged people to give feedback through a number of channels. So there was a leaflet that we delivered. There was coverage in the Herald. We did some e-newsletters and targeted polls and things like that. Just move on to the next slide, please. We had 729 respondents to the questionnaire. Of those that gave us demographic information, 46% were over 65, so that's an overrepresentation of the town's population. Disappointingly, it was only 4% were under 35, so that's a massive underrepresentation. That was, as I said, that's quite a disappointing result. We did try and do a bit more this time to try and increase that compared to the vision consultation, such by moving the platform to Commonplace, which is a lot more engaging. We did the digital engagement room. We also, knowing that this is a problem and it's not anything that's unique to Farnham, we did some social media polls targeted at those younger groups. They're a bit more of a temperature check, but it means we get some sort of element of feedback. It's the first time we've tried doing this to support a consultation, but we clearly just need to do something very, very different going forward to make sure that we're catching these younger people and making sure their voices are properly heard in the programme. While I'm just on this, I just wanted to give a bit of feedback based on a question that had come in this week from one of the board members about how the analysis was done and detailed emails that come in from key stakeholders. Just wanted to give reassurance that all the detailed emails have been read and are being considered by the programme team as we work on the final OIP. In terms of how that was worked with the main analysis, we shared all of this with the Insights team, so it could all be considered alongside the comments from the Commonplace platform. What they did do is they made sure that nobody had submitted comments via email and on Commonplace, because that would be duplicated and it could skew the results. So they made sure that those were only counted once. Moving on to the next slide, please. This is so not everybody who responded had to fill out all parts of the questionnaire, which is why you get sort of 700 comment respondents in total, and then some variations in the people who gave comments on the individual sections. For the wider context, you can see that 56% of people were positive towards the objectives and shortlisting priorities. 218 people talked about some of the Farnham-wide improvements, and you'll sort of see that there was sort of a roughly sort of 50-55% positive, 20-25% negative response across most of these tiles, which shows that people are very broadly supportive, but there is a very significant number of people that perhaps don't completely agree with what's being suggested. On the Farnham-wide improvements, people were particularly keen on walking, cycling, electric vehicles, ultra-low emission buses. Across all areas, they said they would be happy to use greener travel options if they were there. But particularly on Farnham-wide, they did feel that there was a perception that the cost of buses were quite high. Town centre, you get that 54-20% split. Majority of the respondents there did say they walked or drive into town, which is good. There's lots of people saying they're walking. Particular support for a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit and the HGV restrictions, although there were quite polarising views around prospects of some of the pedestrianisation that was mentioned in there. Moving on to the next slide, please. So in North Farnham is the one that was slightly different, 339 responses with a 42% negative and positive and 33% negative. But then if you look at South Farnham, you're back to that sort of 50-20% sort of split. Both on both of those, there were quite polarising views around bypasses. Some people very pro bypasses and some against them. In South Farnham, lots of support for looking into options around that level crossing. And then you've got the A31, which again, that sort of broad positive negative split. Next slide, please. So those are your recommendations, just to note the outcome of this report. And I know that I think Jonathan's going to talk a bit more about what that means in terms of the OIP going forward in just a moment. So yeah, to note the outcome of the report and to consider the feedback provided and for this into the next version of the OIP. As I said, the Insights team did produce this report, but I'm happy to try and answer any questions if I can, and if I can't, I'll make sure I check in with them and come back to anyone.
Thank you, Ben. Any specific comments in relation to that update?
Tim, it's Jeremy here. I think it's absolutely excellent. Thank you for making the effort about younger people. I appreciate not quite the result we wanted, but I know efforts have been made. I think the pattern is very clear that there's sort of broadly 2-to-1 in favour of these changes, with nervousness completely understandable in North Farnham about the impact of changes in the centre, which is obviously what we need to address. I just my question really is, what's the time that we're aiming to publish formally what our recommended solutions are?
Is this one that's better for Simon or Jonathan?
Yes, I can respond. So in terms of we're looking to finalise the OIP by September. Obviously, we need to work through the process for how the publication process. But in terms of the technical work to complete the OIP, we're looking for completion by September.
And will that include all the traffic studies?
Yes, so there's going to be there's traffic studies of the town centre and also traffic studies of the of Hickley's Corner. Going to be incorporated into that, together with high-level assessments of Recklesham and the Western Link as well, to understand the implications of all of the components for the OIP and how it would all work together.
And sorry, Jonathan, one final question. Will you be able to say in that what would happen to pollution levels in the three, or could you build into that an estimate of what will happen to pollution levels in the three pollution hotspots of Recklesham Hill, the station and the town and the borough? Because I think that's quite important data.
It's not planned to be explicitly modelled, but certainly we can provide an overview in terms of the implications for changes in traffic flows and also obviously the changes in congestion. So those are the two key components that drive the air quality problems at the moment, both the volume of traffic and obviously the low traffic speeds. So we'll be taking that into account in the assessments, yes.
Tim, could I just make a request that we do have an estimate of the impact on pollution in that September concluding moment, because I think it's just quite important. This whole project started off with worries about air quality, and I think it would just be very helpful to be able to present those plans and say pollution is estimated to fall from X to Y if we do this.
Absolutely, Jeremy. Jonathan, I think that you'll if you can take that point on board.
We will. Yeah.
I mean, obviously, there's we have the wider county climate change strategy, and that is all about measuring volumes of CO2 emissions and everything else. So it will be very helpful to do whatever we can, certainly in relation to this particular project. So.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Right, so a few more hands have gone up. I think, Catherine, you were first.
Thank you, Tim. Jonathan, just building on your response to Jeremy, is the traffic modelling going to take account of all of the impacts on all of the areas, and does it build on and include the existing housing development that's proposed both in Surrey and in particularly for North Farnham, the sort of 8,000 and odd new houses to the north of Farnham that are going in over the next 5 to 10 years? And the other question is, the other area that's got a pollution problem is obviously also on the Upper Hale Road.
Yes. So
I would also be very keen to understand, what impact that's going to have, and whether that's going to be included. But I'm particularly concerned about what the modelling does and doesn't allow for.
Yeah, so we're taking a systematic approach to the modelling. First of all, understanding the implications of the changes in the road layout and the transport schemes on the flows in the area. So obviously, colleagues will have seen some of the initial indications of what the modelling is telling us, and obviously some of the challenges around that. So obviously, in terms of the specific air quality problems in North Farnham, we're obviously taking those into account as we interrogate the traffic model data. There is a challenge with the traffic model in that obviously, as we've already explained previously, because of the area of scope of the model, and obviously the fact that it's based on the 2019 model base, and obviously those discussions have already taken place. In terms of the forecasting of the impacts of new housing, that needs to be that isn't currently incorporated in the model. We're very aware that is a major challenge in terms of the scale of change that's happening in the area. There is a strategic model for the area, however, that's getting quite old. So what we're proposing to do is to look at in detail using the detailed traffic model, and then take an overview of the potential forecast implications of the new housing, including obviously the large, the very large numbers that are just over the border in Aldershot. We're very, very conscious of those, and we'll provide a more qualitative overview of the impacts of that forecast growth. But we know that this is an area that needs more detailed interrogation over the coming year, and indeed Surrey officers are already working through the development of the new strategic model for the area that will capture all of these issues, and those future issues of the impacts of housing demand will be addressed in the new modelling that's coming on stream next year.
Thanks, Jonathan. I guess I'm slightly alarmed by the fact that we're issuing a report in September, but the modelling is going to be next year. But I guess the other thing is it's not just about housing. I don't know if you're aware, there's a major Amazon delivery depot that's just been approved near Basingstoke, and I'm told a new road between the M3 and the M4 terminating in Odeon, which is obviously where the 287 finishes currently. Are you going to look at those sorts of impacts as well? Because obviously that also has an impact, unfortunately, on the traffic that will flow through the area.
Yeah, so we're having conversations regularly now with with both Hampshire, as obviously the Highway Authority, and with the adjacent planning authorities. So that obviously includes Hart, Rushmore, Guildford and East Hants, to actually ensure that we properly take into account these emerging proposals, including obviously those that have both received consent, but also the emerging long-term strategies that are being developed in each area. So these issues are being taken into account. Clearly, there's a number of spinning wheels that are there. There's never a perfect situation. There's never a perfect time for these things, because clearly, planning is constantly in flux. So we do have to take a position at a particular point of time, recognizing that the data that we have is never going to be perfect. We always have to take into account, future uncertainties, future potential implications, and ensure that the plan is robust. But it's never, there's never going to be a perfect time, and our view is that September is the right time to be publishing the IP, but obviously taking into account the potential uncertainties around growth, and obviously those we will continue to work with you and the board in terms of developing the blueprint as we move forward, remembering that the OIP is an overarching strategy, but all of the components in terms of relation to the town centre, Hickleys, North and South Farnham, will all be continued to be developed, and regularly we will be bringing them together to ensure that everything fits together using the OIP approach.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Okay, thank you. I think Paul follows was next. Paul.
Thank you, Chair, and my apologies for being a few minutes late. I just wanted to agree with the point that Jeremy made about air quality, and also the point that you mentioned, Chair, regarding measurement of it. I think under most circumstances, it seems pretty unlikely that net traffic volumes are going to reduce significantly. It's just going to be where they go and the flow of them. If the modelling indicates that the points of congestion and therefore probably air quality problems move, will we be putting additional measuring sites around any parts of Farnham to actually measure the impact? Because it does seem to me important that not, I mean, anecdotally, I suspect it'll be worse, but I think Tim's point about measurement is absolutely critical here. We need this not to be anecdotal, we need it to be evidence-based. Are we going to be having more measuring sites if the modelling indicates that that's necessary?
We will need to do that, yes. That obviously goes without saying, that will need to take place. So once we've identified the impacts from the modelling, and we've now got a very good understanding of the changes in flows and queues and congestion in different parts of the town. Obviously, that will then be used to inform the monitoring strategy, and we'll be working very closely with Waverley officers to ensure that happens. Just a point though that we can obviously, in terms of the strategy, we can look at moving traffic around to obviously achieve our objectives for the town, particularly obviously improving quality of place and ensuring back traffic is on places that is more suited to where it should be. But ultimately, there are going to be trade-offs involved in terms of the balance of impacts, and this is a conversation that needs to be had. But ultimately, in terms of improving the air quality, the best thing that we can do in terms of reducing congestion and improving the quality of place and creating more space for people to walk and cycle is to think about how we can provide those better travel choices for people. And obviously we're not seeking to to beat people with a stick. That is not the purpose of what we're trying to do. But what we're seeking to do is to create better conditions for walking and cycling and better buses that makes it innately more attractive to use those alternatives and to try to reduce the car dependence, so that we can actually look at delivering some substantial reductions in traffic into the town centre, which is time and time again proven to be the most effective way of tackling air pollution in town centres.
Thank you, Jonathan. I think absolutely. As long as we can prove all of that is happening or not happening with data, I think that I can't imagine anybody here is going to be against making sure it's robust as possible in terms of, because a lot of people will take perception of how things are, and I think we just need to make sure we can defend it with reality.
Absolutely.
So thank you.
Yes.
Just as an aside, Paul, we're just about to establish a greener future board, which will be a county-wide board with all of our partners involved, and that's going to kind of oversee the delivery strategy for all of that greener agenda, and a key part of that is delivering the carbon emission reductions that we have to achieve both as a county authority by 2030 and as a county by 2050. So there's going to be a lot of energy and work going into exactly that, because it's a good point that if you address it in one area, it will probably displace it to another. So that's why we need to kind of take a kind of holistic view.
Thanks, Tim.
Right, I think John Neal and then Peter Clark.
Thank you, Tim. Yes, the September date is interesting. It's only a couple of months away. I'm slightly concerned that we haven't really had much visibility to date of your thinking on the Hickleys station area, which is obviously quite a complex one and maybe offers up a few options here. So how are we going to have that iteration at all before September with members?
So for our response from the team is obviously the team have been working through the traffic data, using the traffic model to understand not only the symptoms of the problems in the Hickleys area, but also looking at the root causes in terms of really understanding in depth the traffic routings in the area. So that's an important first step. And then from that, they've been developing the objectives of what it is we're trying to achieve with a scheme at Hickleys in terms of both providing that connectivity, east-west connectivity through the town, but also the specific problems that we've already identified around the level crossing and obviously the connections to the south and connections from the A31 to the 287 in particular. So the team have developed a set of key principles that the Hickleys scheme needs to consider. In addition, we obviously need to think about the severance for active travel at Hickleys and the problems that are caused there. And obviously, if we would, for example, if we were to be looking at widening of the Hickleys junction, what would the implications be for walking and cycling? And of course, we need to think about the linkages with the town centre. So one of the principles that we've identified with the town centre proposals is that there will be impacts on the A31, obviously due to the rerouting of traffic as we take capacity out of the town centre. So all of these factors need to be captured in the design principles for Hickleys. The team are then working up options for the Hickleys scheme. Obviously in time for a submission to DFT in September, and I think Simon and Paula, and Elaine, we need to take that as an action for a workshop with local stakeholders, with councillors, to actually work through the evidence and the optioneering, and to obviously explain our thinking in terms of how we're looking at the options, and indeed identifying new options for the area, because obviously things have moved on since the last time the scheme was looked at back in 2004. So I think we need a workshop with yourselves to actually talk through our latest thinking before we submit to DFT in September, and indeed before it gets incorporated into the IP. Sorry.
Is it worth mentioning also that the September deadline, John, is to do with ensuring that we have a robust strategic case to apply for the funding, which Surrey County Council have been sort of in the queue for with DFT, and then the same process that we followed with the OIP in terms of working up the options and then going through consultation both with the board as well as with the public. We will be following that exact same process. So there's not going to be any surprises.
Yep.
Okay, well, you've responded in saying you're going to interact on this one, so thank you.
Yes.
Okay, well, I'm conscious we sort of drifted into the next item, but let's take Peter's question, and then Jonathan, if you can just move straight on to item 5. Peter.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be brief. Question for Jonathan. Jonathan has stated that he's looking at the modelling of future traffic flow, and of course part of that is the housing development. Can Jonathan confirm that he's using the Farnham Neighbourhood Plan and the East Hants local plan? These obviously give sites and the number of houses allocated to these sites, so I suspect they'd be very useful.
So in terms of the current strategic model that's available to look at forecast growth, as I said, it is an old model. It's based on it's a 2014 model, so clearly things have moved on substantially since then, and that's why Surrey colleagues are now in the process of developing the new strategic model for the county. Which will take into account the latest planning information in the area, which will include the neighbourhood plan, I'm led to understand, and also obviously the major sites in East Hants, including obviously Whitehall, Borden, because we know that they're strategic allocations, and indeed the barracks at Aldershot and strategic growth west of Guildford. So all of those points should be captured in the strategic modelling that's taking place, and we'll commit to take that back to Surrey colleagues to make sure that those allocations are actually captured in that strategic modelling.
Excellent, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So, yeah, Jonathan, are you happy just to move straight through?
Sure. So what? So next slide, please, Peter. Thank you. Okay, so obviously, Ben's provided a detailed narrative of the levels of support and the high level, if you like, quantitative issues raised from the consultation. What I'd like to do now is to provide an overview, a snapshot of some of the key specific comments that have been raised and how we're going to respond to that. My method here is to use the Town Council's consultation response, because that really captured as a snapshot some of the critical issues that were raised by many of the stakeholders. The Town Council response covers a wide range of issues covering all parts of the town, and have obviously given us good pause to reflect as a team in terms of how we need to address the IP as it's finalised. So next slides, please. So obviously feedback was provided both on the IP, both through the Commonplace platform, so the interactive tool, and obviously written responses. All of that feedback's been reviewed, and as I've said, the Town Council response provides that framework. So next slide, please. So I've got quite a few slides here. We've sort of already provided an overview to some of the board members, so I'm therefore going to really rattle through these because we've obviously already picked up some detailed comments, but we'll make sure that we have an opportunity to reflect as a board on the critical issues that have been raised. So next slide, please. So in terms of and really, as I've said, this really does reflect the key themes that are being raised through consultation and the critical issues that we need to address in finalising the IP. And for example, you can see this point here about congestion and air quality. This has already been raised today, and that's a very salient point that needs to be addressed as we finalise the plan. So in terms of dealing with the specifics, next slide, please. In terms of a Western Link Road, and there's obviously a significant amount of debate about the nature of any new infrastructure around the west of Farnham, and I think we need to recognise that a Recklesham bypass would play a very different role to a Western link between the Odiham Road and the A31. It's also important to recognise that obviously Recklesham bypass, there has been a history of developing options. It's a relatively shorter scheme, and it would likely to be less complex. And in our view, a Recklesham bypass could be delivered more rapidly than a longer distance Western link connecting Odiham Road to the A31. At the moment, we're examining the case for both of these schemes through some high-level initial feasibility work. We're looking at the traffic movements using the area from a range of different sources of data. We're using techniques to identify the potential volumes of traffic that could divert to the link, obviously then the benefits and the impacts across the town, and hence a potential business case. And obviously the key point about the business case is that we need to actually demonstrate that traffic would use it, that it would provide benefits to the rest of the town, that would obviously justify the significant investments that would be needed. I would raise a point though, that a Western link would take a very long time to develop, and a business case is by no means guaranteed. And indeed, there could be all sorts of constraints in delivering such a large piece of new infrastructure. So we need to be considering it as a potential option that could enhance the programme, but it cannot create showstopper issues that would prevent us delivering the rest of the programme. So obviously the board and residents have ambitions for the town centre. We can't be in a position where any action to improve the town centre would be dependent on that Western link. So I think that's a very important principle that we all need to pick up on. Next slide, please. Many of the points that have been raised in the consultation feedback, we agree with fully, and we recognise that we need to make these points clearer in the narrative for within the plan. So in terms of pedestrian focus, we recognise that Farnham is a very important destination town, both in terms of obviously its retailing, its visitor economy, and indeed a growing nighttime economy, and indeed as an important visitor destination with its unique with its USPs. And likewise, we agree that the impacts on congestion, air quality, all of that needs to be addressed through the modelling that we're doing. And then the point's been raised also about the role of a transport hub around the station. It's important to recognise that the station itself should become an important multimodal hub in its own right, but equally we do need investment at Hickleys to ensure that traffic is moving more efficiently around the area. And indeed, we need to think about how investment at Hickleys would interact with investment at the station, that whatever we do at Hickleys doesn't obviate or constrain the potential for the station, and that we consider those together. Next slide, please. So what I propose is just to sort of work through the issues, and Peter Birch will be prodding me if I'm overrunning. There's quite a bit of material here, so I'm going to rattle through it. So Chair, if you feel that I'm being a bit slow, please do interject, and then perhaps pick up on Q&A at the end when people have had the opportunity to sort of reflect on the overall narrative, if that's okay. Next slide, please, Peter. So the first point really about the town centre is that the treatment of the town centre is fundamental to the future of the town, and we fully recognise that, and the importance of better catering for pedestrians and for and for ensuring also that we think about phased implementation that mitigates against adverse impacts. We agree with that entirely, and we will make that clear in the OIP. And the first theme that came through was the ambition for a wide-ranging pedestrian zone that extends across much of the town centre. Next slide, please. So in terms of the response from the team and points for reflection by the board, we do need to be thinking about what we actually mean by a pedestrian zone, because clearly this is going to strongly influence the design and layout of options for the town centre. And during the work to date, we've generated a wide range of options from, right through from considering the long-term role of the existing social distancing measures, which will be covered later as a separate item, right through to removal of different types of vehicles from different parts of the town centre. But there is a key principle here that whatever we do need to be improving conditions for walking and cycling, because that's a key requirement of the programme, and the quality of the public realm. And if we don't do that, I think really we have to question whether we've met our objectives. We've considered a wide range of options, including those that are consistent with that ambition for a large-scale pedestrian zone. And obviously, we've provided some initial feedback at workshops with officers and members, and obviously we're reflecting on that and considering how we need to progress in terms of the revisiting and reassessing the options that are there. Next slide, please. So connectivity between Brightwells and the town centre, and I know that many of you have already raised points that Brightwells needs to have a much greater visibility in the OIP, and indeed, there's also further development in the town centre with Woolmead as well. So next slide, please, in terms of how we're proposing to deal with this. So we're going to we're going to significantly strengthen the narrative on Brightwells, including not just the fact that it's creating new development, new economic, new opportunities for the town, but also in terms of how that changes the fabric of how the town works, including key walking and cycling routes. And clearly that's going to have implications for the volumes of the numbers of people who are crossing South Street down towards Gostrey Meadow, but also at that critical point of the network at the Royal Deer Junction, where we're having to cater for so many different competing demands, both traffic but also pedestrian movement. So that's going to be a key question for the town centre component of the IP as we move forward. Next slide, please. Then in terms of this issue on prohibitions and deliveries, we need to think about this quite carefully. So next slide, please. So we obviously need to give careful consideration about which vehicles are permitted access, because clearly that has significant implications for how different types of traffic are routed, and indeed how we manage conflicting movements at junctions in particular. But we recognise that we're going to have to provide access for essential vehicles, for emergency vehicles. Obviously, that's a key requirement. But there's also a number of local residents in the area, including obviously Church Lane and Castle Street itself. We need to think about how they can actually access their properties, but also delivery and servicing, recognising the needs of the town centre economy, as well as obviously buses, taxis and cyclists. Now buses, there's obviously a key challenge here, because the town centre is a hub for a number of different services connecting across the area, and we have to think about the practicality of how we ensure good quality bus access to the heart of the town centre. We can't be in a position where buses have just simply been pushed out and services it becomes more difficult for the operators. And this is a key theme that we'll be picking up with the operators and the bus planning team at the County Council as they develop their new bus service improvement plan. We did identify potential thinking about freight consolidation centres, and we've already picked up on comments from board members in terms of potential locations for that. That's all being picked up in the review work that we're taking place. But also we need to think about viability, and we do need to think about if we just had timed access restrictions, so that essentially you would only need to use consolidation, the consolidation centre at certain times of day. That could well create challenges to the viability. In order to make it viable, we would recommend that it would be operating on a full-time basis to make best possible use of the infrastructure, and obviously the more local vehicles that would service that. So we're looking at that, and we will need to think about that quite carefully as we finalise the plans. Next slide, please. Then we have the issue of the access road between Castle Hill and West Street to provide access to the Hart car park. Next slide, please. So there are a number of challenges that would need to be addressed with this. And again, I would raise the point that we need to be careful that the town centre proposals don't become wholly dependent on the construction of a new road, because there are some significant challenges with such an option, namely, obviously, land assembly and purchase. Obviously, we would be aiming, if at all possible, to reach agreements. But if agreements can't be reached, that would then introduce the requirement for obviously compulsory purchase orders. And of course, it also needs to go through the planning process, with planning applications and so on. So there are, there are some important procedural issues that would need to be addressed with such a scheme. There are also the practical issues in terms of how you would introduce a new access road into the historic fabric of the town, recognising that that particular route has historically been a public right of way, but only as a footpath. So creating a new road would be a very new historical precedent for the town, and we have to consider obviously the issues around the visual impact, around the impacts around the obviously the historic and heritage nature of the castle, because obviously it would create a significant change. And then there is obviously this question of whether provision of a new road would that be consistent with the overall strategy that we're seeking to achieve for the town centre. But then there are practical implications in terms of what does such a road mean? What is it designed to achieve? Who is it catering for? The first question would be is that we know that for people coming from the north, there is no car park on the immediate access. And obviously, if you're coming from the north, you need to circulate all the way around the gyratory. And the first car park that you can reach is obviously the central car park, three legs around the gyratory. With changes to the town centre, we could obviously provide more direct access to the Hart. That would become the most logical car park to access. But that's obviously on the western side of the town. So that would be the logical destination. But then the question would be, is it just about providing access to the car park? Or does it have a wider function? Because if you provide access to the Hart car park through this link, how would you actually ensure that you prevent through traffic from getting to West Street, if that's all you want to achieve? Would you have to put bollards through the middle of the Hart car park? So essentially you have a Hart North and Hart South. That's a critical issue. Or would you be looking to create a new through connection to West Street, catering for those wider north-south movements in the town? And obviously that's an important question in terms of relating to the how we deal with connectivity from North Farnham. And if it does provide a through connection, clearly the traffic flows are going to be substantially higher. So we would need to think about the treatment of that road, and how it would be designed to fit into the, to the local public realm, and ensure that it doesn't create a new form of severance through that part of the town, particularly given the importance of the ambitions to better integrate UCA into the rest of the town centre. So those are all key questions that we need to think about. Next slide, please. Then in terms of this ambition for retaining existing car parks without clogging up local access roads, there was a view from the Town Council that the car parks can be retained in their current form. Next slide, please. We do need to recognise that you can't, so from our perspective, that there will inevitably be changes in the way that people use the car parks with the changes to the town centre, because the routings of the traffic will be different. People will be coming in from different directions, and obviously people will be accessing the car parks in different ways. So we do need to make sure that future treatment of car parking is consistent with the access strategy. We're also planning for significant improvements in walking, cycling, and public transport. Those will be enabling modal shift. And as I've said previously, the best way to improve conditions in the town centre is to actually think about how we can reduce the need for so much traffic. And that will, sorry, somebody's just disturbed me. That will clearly be the major benefit, and therefore a key part of that is going to be thinking about how people use parking. And we do need to think about the extent to which car parking is actually encouraging people to travel into the town centre, and whether through the parking strategy we can be proactive in terms of encouraging people to use the enhanced options, the enhanced alternatives that will be there in terms of buses, walking, cycling, and so on. So this, we're also conscious that Waverley are now developing their own parking strategy. We need to ensure that that strategy is consistent with the ambitions for the town centre. We do also need to think about not only the needs of local residents, but of course visitors from further afield, recognising that Farnham is a destination. So that has to be a key part of it in terms of the wayfinding, the access, and ensuring that there is sufficient parking for people who really need to use it, who don't have the alternatives. Next slide, please. We talk here about this ambition for cycleways and high-frequency shuttle buses to actually encourage this shift in travel demand. And in terms of our response, next slide, please. So we agree with all of these principles, and we've been developing our proposals for an integrated grid of walking and cycling routes connecting to the key destinations. That's in line with the principles and then the government guidance for what we call an LC-WIP, a local cycling walking infrastructure plan that are mandated by the Department for Transport. We followed that methodology, and that will be integrated into the IP, and indeed that will pick up on some of the specific comments that have been raised by stakeholders in terms of the different routes, including the treatment of crossings, the crossing of Hickley's Corner, but also how we better integrate Brightwells into this into the fabric of walking and cycling. We're in due course, we'll be developing the proposals for the new bus services, and all of that needs to be integrated into the new bus services improvement plan that Surrey is now developing and needs to be submitted to the department by October. So we have a real opportunity here to deliver some transformation in how we look at buses in Farnham, particularly given the strong government policy agenda for buses in its Bus Back Better agenda that was published last month. There's a huge opportunity to improve buses in the area, but obviously in the context of the limited road space that we have, we do need to be thinking about how we can best accommodate the needs of buses, recognising obviously the narrow streets that we face, and obviously the problems that we've had quite regularly in terms of buses being delayed on the road network with roadworks and so on. So we do need to be thinking about the needs of buses as well as walking and cycling. But we as transport planners, we know that one of the biggest influences to how much people are prepared to use buses and walk and cycle is the availability of free car parking. Where free parking is available, or cheap and plentiful parking is available, it is always more challenging to encourage people to use buses. And that has to be a key consideration as we move forward, the relative competitiveness of buses in terms of the frequencies, the fares, the quality, the reliability, against the ability to obviously just drive straight into a car park and plan and pay, pay relatively easily. So that's a key factor in terms of the balance between parking and the balance between providing those attractive alternatives. Next slide, please.
Jonathan, can I just check how many more slides you've got?
Yeah, sorry, I'm gonna rattle through now because I'm conscious of the time. So I think the town centre was the most important one, but I'm going to rattle through the neighbourhoods and the MRN now. So Peter, if we can just rattle through quickly. So there's a point here about the importance of bus services and park and ride in catering for the needs of the different neighbourhoods. So next slide, please, Peter. So I've already raised this point about bus services have been captured within the so-called BSIP, the Bus Service Improvement Plan, and in terms of considering the role of park and ride, and the importance here that if park and ride were to be considered as an option, it doesn't just become a default option for for Farnham residents. That would not be the purpose. It needs to be for the journeys for further afield. Next slide, please. In terms of then north, so I've covered the 3 different areas here. So points have been raised about the specific measures for Northwest Farnham, Recklesham and Northeast Farnham. And in terms of the next slide, please. So we agree with these ambitions that have been identified in terms of the for better village spaces across the north and the south of Farnham, and we also fully recognise the concerns that have been raised about the potential implications of the town centre in actually the potential risk of worsening traffic conditions through increases in traffic flow, and we're looking at those actively as part of the OIP to minimise the issues created there, but also to really explore the options for significantly improving the conditions. Those will also be looked at in further detail through specific studies to take place later this year for North Farnham and South Farnham, and obviously in the case of Recklesham, we're now exploring the potential benefits of the bypass. Next slide, please. Then in terms of the station area, creating a new transport hub and workable active travel route to the town centre. Next slide, please. So yes, as I've already said, we're going to be looking at this as a multimodal hub. Further work will be needed at a later date. We won't be providing, a specific blueprint at this stage, but the point is it will set out the key principles that need to be addressed, and it will need to take into account the changes in road layout with Hickleys. Next slide, please. So then in terms of the major road network, and this is very much focused on Hickleys and issues around Recklesham and the Western Link. So we've picked up that, and we recognise that the text in the draft OIP was quite vague in terms of the ambitions for Hickleys. We've now done substantially more work on that, so I'll provide our response in the next slide. And we agree with all the sentiments that have been raised, and we've very much validated that through the analyses of the traffic flows in terms of the interrelationships between South Street, Firgrove Hill and the town centre. And through the modelling work that we're doing, both on the town centre and in the Hickleys area itself, we're understanding in a large amount of detail the interrelationships between the different parts of the network. And indeed, that's informing our work, as I previously explained. Next slide, please. And then we have the ambitions here for a proper interchange, for active travel, the recognition of the conservation area and not to be intruding into that, and dealing with the level crossing problems. Next slide, please. So just a brief overview of the narrative here. In terms of interchange, we consider we need better interchange both between the travel modes and creating the transport hub, and interchange between the A31 and the 287 and roads to the south of Hickleys, because that's a key problem. And active travel is going to be a key theme across our work, across the whole of the corridor between Coxbridge and Shepherd and Flock, because we know that that's a significant cause of severance between South Farnham and the town centre. Likewise, interchange at Firgrove Hill, we are considering options there, including a number of those that have previously been put forward to us. One suggestion was put forward for a roundabout at Hickleys Corner. That will be going into the list of options, but we do need to recognise that it's actually very difficult, particularly for cyclists, to navigate around roundabouts. And if we were to consider such options, we shouldn't be just considering a standard large-scale highways or traffic oriented roundabout. It must consider the needs of people walking and cycling from the station. And we also recognise the issues with Shepherd and Flock in terms of the conservation, but we do think that some localised widening on the approaches and the gyratory may well be needed to actually get the solutions to work for the town. And then I've previously mentioned several times the level crossing. That has to be an integral part of the solution, and that's being actively addressed now. Next slide, please. Then we have the western bypass to provide relief, and a Recklesham bypass. And I've previously said a western bypass and a Recklesham bypass do perform different functions. So the next slide, please, in terms of our response. So we've initiated feasibility studies on these. We're currently looking at them as separate projects, but we will obviously also consider, if those were to be introduced together, what would be the implications. And of course, we need to think about any unforeseen consequences of creating a significant north-south route to the west of the town, whether that might actually draw more traffic into the area. So in terms of each of the studies are going to be considering the traffic movements and the potential shift. In the case of Recklesham, we will be taking it a little further at this stage in terms of looking at the technical environmental constraints and routing options, so that we can be prepared for introducing a scheme at a later date into the DFT investment programme. But as I've said previously, a western bypass will need substantially more work to look at the issues and constraints. Next slide, please. And I think that's it. Yes. So I'm conscious I've done a lot of talking. I'm going to be quiet now and Chair, if I could take questions.
Well, thank you, Jonathan. I'm not going to encourage questions, I'm afraid. I see there are a couple of hands up, and I'll come to John and Andy. But this was reported back on the feedback. The slides will be circulated. Everybody has either contributed to that feedback or can do so. So I'm not going to open up a conversation about any of those items, because I want to get onto the quick wins and the programme moving forward. So with that caveat, John and Andy, John, could you just make any comments briefly, please?
Yes, thank you, Tim. And I didn't want to go into details. I just really wanted to thank Jonathan for a very comprehensive response, especially based on the Town Council's input to you. And it was very encouraging. Especially the 2 points that we've raised as concerns about the car parks and the that potential link road. So you gave a lot of detail on that, and thank you very much. I remember Ben Coleman came down a week or so ago and started talking about the place aspect of the programme, and that was very encouraging as well. And I just maybe point out, suggest that in the next round of the OIP, if you could somehow put in a bit of visualizations of the place potentials, I think that would help a lot, where we've got this hesitancy in the community about, do we want, what's the impact of pedestrianisation and what are the benefits of it? So I just raise that point, please. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Yep.
Thank you, John. And Andy?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, similar comment in the way to John. I'd just like to congratulate Jonathan, you and the team, for showing that you've got a terrific understanding now of the interrelationship between all of these different projects and how they link together and how they can be looked overall. A couple of quick comments in two areas, though. One is in terms of Hickleys project. I think we should be referring to that now as the A31 project, because there's much more to the Hickley's project than just Hickley's Corner. As you said, there's a link to the Fairgrove Hill. We need to be probably looking again at the Fairgrove Hill Bridge, as the original Hickley scheme was due to do. And I'll just leave that one as that. It's a much bigger thing than just Hickley's Corner. In terms of Brightwells, actually, one of the things that's happening with Brightwells, and I'm totally in support of this. In fact, I suggested it to Chris Tunstall, that we relook at the road arrangements for Brightwells, and that is actually happening. But at the moment, it's happening as a sort of semi-separate project, and we need to actually show it as integrated into this project, actually, because there will need to be a new planning permission for the Brightwells scheme if we're going to do the road differently from originally planned by Chris Nicholson. And that's all got to happen pretty quickly. And also that needs to integrate with improvements for Brightwells in the borough and that sort of thing. So there's a lot of detail to talk about, and so I won't bring it up now, but we need to be talking about that outside of this meeting, yep. Jonathan, and integrating that into the scheme. It's not shown as that at the moment. It's almost shown as a separate project, and we need to integrate it into this project. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks very much. I think, Jonathan, that those, if I could just ask you to note those points and pick them up, if that's okay, because I think they're valid points. Yeah, just to reiterate the thanks to you and the team for that very detailed feedback and indeed for the work that's gone into it to get that input from stakeholders, and we'll pick up in a minute what we're going to do going forward. But Jonathan, if there's any other closing comments you want to make?
That's it from me, thank you. And yeah, we'll take on board those comments, and obviously we're working hard to ensure that everything is picked up. So thank you.
Yeah, brilliant, lovely. Thank you very much. Okay, we'll move then to item 6 and to Richard on the Quick Wins project update. Richard.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. This is my first board meeting, so a quick introduction. I'm Richard Mothersdale, work for Arcadis as a project manager, and recently taken over the Quick Wins management after Chris Tunstall's recent retirement. So we've been working quite closely with Atkins, Waverley, Farnham to get to a grip of what's required. We're going through a stage 2 sifting process at the moment for the vast majority of the projects. And we'll come on to that in a little while. But 4 projects have been progressed as we speak, and that's the HGV restrictions, speed restrictions, wayfinding, and the road reclassification. So next slide, please. Okay, so HGV restrictions. There's been a consultation carried out with no objections from the statutory consultees, a site visit undertaken, and the signed drawings have been issued to Surrey County Councils for design review. Once they've been reviewed and taken forward, we can then start procuring with Kia, the framework contractor. We'd like to get some early contractor involvement with Kia, because obviously we want to avoid any unnecessary delays in getting these early quick wins implemented. So we're hoping, as you can see from the slide, we should be complete by the autumn. Next slide, please. Speed restrictions. I've had a meeting with Waverley Council, looking at various measures. The problem we do have with the speed restrictions is they have to be ratified by the local committee, and there is one in July, but that was a little bit too early to do a justified job. So we're going for the November committee meeting, which means that will be developed in the autumn, with a view to getting on site in early 2022.
Sorry, Richard, can I just stop you there? When will you be in a position to have a report for the committee? Ignore the committee date at the moment. When could you have it ready by?
We could probably turn it around fairly quickly. We do have some speed surveys that we need to complete, but we should have a report well in advance of the November meeting. If you want to report, are you thinking to have an extraordinary meeting?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't want to leave it until November. So if you could perhaps indicate when you would be ready, then we'll have a word with the chair.
Yeah.
And the
And we'll
committee
come back.
officers.
We'll come back to you with a programme, Tim.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Richard, carry on.
No problem. Next slide, please. Wayfinding, yes. Atkins are currently doing the feasibility study and the strategy. We expect to have that complete by the end of June. And then we can consult with stakeholders with a view to taking that forward and getting the design in place. And again, we're hoping to have the scheme on the ground with a decent designed up scheme and start work in the autumn again using the framework contractor Kia, getting them involved early just so we can get road space bookings and make sure there's no things that are going to get in the way, and make sure everything's in place for an autumn start on that one. Next slide, please. The road reclassification, we have submitted a paper on that. Simon, have you got any comment on the road reclassification?
So the paper has been circulated, so all board members should have hopefully seen the paper by now, and the recommendations around the A325 only. I've received limited feedback, and that is broadly in support of the A325. It'd be good to get any more feedback on that from any other board members that have a point to make on that. And if not, we can crack on with getting this in place. We've already warmed up Kia, our supply chain, to get ready to deal with this. But I would like to make sure that we've received all comments on it.
Next slide, please. Right, so onto the the quick wins pipeline. Obviously, we started off with around about 100 schemes so far. We have completed this, what we call the stage 1 sifting process, which has reduced the list down to about 60 schemes, and it's a mix of schemes involving a wide range of like projects. As I say, stage 2 has just commenced. Atkins have been heavily involved with that. Have you got any comment, Jonathan, on how that's going?
So sorry, I've just gone off video. No, I don't at the moment. I think
No.
we should be progressing on that.
Yeah. Okay, we're on to the next slide, please. So you can see the types of schemes we're looking at, mainly maintenance, traffic management, HGVs, traffic speeds, wayfinding, as I say, that we're already dealing with at the moment. I think the big take from this is they've got to be projects that have a maximum impact, you know, to show the public what we're doing. And we also need to ensure that we don't carry out any abortive projects. So as future projects come online, in projects 2, 3, 4, I'm very conscious that we need to be careful we don't do things under project 1, the quick wins, that end up being replaced as part of future schemes. So it's making sure it all ties together, and there's no abortive works, and it's also making sure we don't spread ourselves too thinly as well, because one of the biggest problems with this sort of package, even though you've got like £2.5 million to spend, if you spread yourself too thinly, it can quite often look like we haven't done anything. So we need to make sure that everything's got maximum impact and people can see a tangible sort of benefit in what we're doing. So next slide, please. So yeah, the quick wins pipeline, stage 1 RAG assessment. Jonathan, do you want to embellish this, because you've been quite heavily involved with this, haven't you?
Yeah, so I mean, I won't go into too much detail, but essentially, it's a series of pass-fail criteria to really ensure that we are identifying the right scheme. So clearly, anything needs to be consistent with the vision of what we're trying to achieve for the town. We also need to think about affordability. It obviously schemes need to sit within the funding envelope that we've got available. We need to think about whether things can be practically delivered. So, you know, with due respect to Ecclesham bypass isn't a quick win, for example. And then we also need to ensure that it's consistent with the wider agenda in terms of avoiding abortive work. And then planning policy. Obviously, it's got to be consistent with what the authorities are seeking to do in the town. and then we need to think about whether whether it can be delivered in terms of whether it's within the existing highway boundary. If land acquisition would be needed, clearly that would introduce a whole load more complication and obviously introduce potential delay to the programme. So hopefully those are a sensible set of criteria for applying pass-fails, and then from that obviously you can see that we've identified just over 60 in the shortlist for further development, and the 32 red schemes wouldn't be further progressed at this stage because clearly one or more sort of essential showstopper issues, which means that they can't be progressed. I would emphasise though that those schemes that weren't shortlisted at this stage will obviously be incorporated into the longer term thinking for the OIP.
Thanks, Jonathan. Next slide, please. So the recommendations, we're looking at an allocation of 2.6 million, and we're looking at spreading the quick wins projects across financial years 21-22 and 22-23. Now, we're doing that to give the schemes justice. Obviously, we've got a lot of schemes to get through, a lot of projects, and we want to give them justice, as I say, and to allow enough time to get them designed properly, get them procured, and get them on the ground. We're looking at an 18-month programme.
Richard, I'd just like to add to that. We've brought Keir on board early with this programme.
Yep.
To help us with both the SIF criteria, but also in terms of planning, because the idea will be that we'll have a dedicated team to deliver these quick wins so that we can do it the most efficiently and effectively, and bearing in mind impact on traffic and pedestrian access, etc., whilst we're doing it. So and then that will lead into the further town centre works.
Yeah, thank you, Simon. So that, I would normally say open it to questions, but I don't think.
No, well, we're happy to take any questions or comments if anybody has any.
Tim, it's Jeremy here. I just want to say fantastic progress. Thank you. That looks extremely thorough, and I think it will do what we need to happen, which is give people confidence that there's momentum behind the programme early.
Yeah. Thank you. Michaela.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm slightly disappointed. I thought the HGV restrictions were coming in earlier than September, and I hope the programme won't slip. That's what I'm worried about. And going back, I welcome the road reclassification of the 325. I think it would be a good idea. Thanks very much. Thank you.
I think, yeah, thank you, Michaela. And I did pick up with Simon the other day, and he's put a comment in the chat that we're certainly now hoping and expecting the HGV signage to be put up and implemented in August during the school holidays, partly because that hopefully will be less disruptive. There is some timing issue, some timing constraints around the procurement process, but as Simon says, Keir kind of fully engaged with this, so they will be put in as soon as possible as can possibly be done. But so we're not certainly not expecting it to slip from that timetable.
Thank you.
Catherine.
Yeah, yes, really to reiterate the same things about the HGVs. Obviously, there's a lot of desire to accelerate that. It's good news if that can be done in the school holidays rather than at any other time. And just regarding the road classification, obviously, absolutely welcome the reclassification of the A325, but also would, request very strongly that, it doesn't recommend reclassifying the A287, which is the north-south route through the town. And just, to re-emphasise the fact that that obviously does need to be taken into account, that analysis in the development of proposals for the town centre, because of the impacts on both South and North Farnham. But I agree, absolutely great progress. It's nice to see things getting done. Thank you.
Thank you. Simon, do you want to just comment on the 287 point?
Yeah, no, absolutely, Catherine. I think we've exchanged correspondence on this as well. It's all been taken into account in terms of the wider modelling and the impacts on North Farnham, and will be included in the North Farnham area study as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Good. Okay, well, we'll continue to keep everybody up to date in terms of the progress on those quick wins. But we are now.
Yeah, Tim.
Sorry,
the idea is that once we've established that list and make sure that it's robust, that we do share that with stakeholders, because clearly, we want to get buy-in.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, certainly, the 40 green ones and the 28 amber ones. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So those will be circulated between now and the next board meeting, I think, which is not until September. So, and also, we'll set out the timetable for delivery of those specific projects. Okay, Richard, unless there's anything else you want to add at this stage?
No, I don't think there is. I mean, if obviously any questions people have towards the end of the meeting, if they want to raise them, more than happy to answer them if I can. Okay,
that's great. Lovely, thank you very much. In that case, we will move to the next item, which is the programme update. Paula, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. For the benefit of new members, my name is Paula Goff, and I'm Surrey County Council's Programme Manager, have been for the past 18 months since we started this journey. This section of the presentation is to give you a bit of an update on the key progress we've achieved to date, the forecast of our key milestones, as well as a visibility of what we're going to be doing in the next period. Next slide, please. So in terms of the key activities that we have sort of fulfilled, and I don't want to repeat everything that sort of Jonathan has covered comprehensively already, but obviously we are coming to the completion of the OIP following the comprehensive comments that we've received. We're looking at the town centre study with PJA, who've done a great piece of initial work on the options available, and we're going to be moving on to more in-depth modelling of those. We also have started new strands of work in terms of the area studies for Farnham North and South, as well as the Western Bypass, which we are considering as feasibility studies, as enabling works before we adopt them possibly as a new project into our vision, and that will be obviously brought to the board for the member approval. We're going to be having a huge focus on a business case strategy to ensure that we don't lose our space in the queue, if you like, with the FT around funding the Hickley's Corner project, but also we're looking in parallel to that to what elements of the town centre could potentially be a credible fit to go to DFT as one package for infrastructure improvements, for example, the walking and cycling elements. We will be coming to you with our thinking and direction on that as this progresses. Consultation with stakeholders and third parties have been ongoing. So in particular, we've been talking with Network Rail on the Hickley's Corner. We've also been collaborating with Transport for the South East around the orbital studies that they're undertaking that we need to be in full alignment with. And we've also been speaking extensively with other borough councils, with Hampshire, with Hart, with Rushmore, to make sure that some of the elements such as the town centre regeneration, the more side elements such as ensuring that the cultural anchors of Farnham is considered, the green spaces, the leisure facilities, all of these things are thought about, and then we are all in tune in terms of delivering the future town centre for Farnham. We have also conducted a cost planning exercise, which has now been completed and is sitting with Surrey for review. We will be bringing to the next board an extract of this cost plan so that we have a look to the level of investment that we need to achieve to deliver the programme. Variance against the schedule. We have through the extensive consultations that we've had on OIP and several iterations of commentary that we've had, we are now coming to creating the final report, that is a little bit behind our agenda. Submission of the A31 strategic outline business cases is still in for DFT. We are aiming to produce that in terms of the strategic fit by the end of September, and the installation of HGVs, which we've already talked about, planned for August. There is a detailed quick wins schedule program that board members are very welcome to have a copy of, should you be interested in. We have just changed the quick wins program from a 12 months to a 24 months period. Next slide, please. In the next, during the next phase, we're going to be obviously issuing that OIP report. We're going to be commissioning the local cycling and walking implementation plan, working with Waverley Borough Council on their plans, with Tom, as well as with other adjacent councils to ensure that what's created is a robust network and is a legitimate replacement as a mode of transport for other means of accessing Farnham. Progressing the development of the town centre solution, as I mentioned, those heritage elements, the cultural elements, which make it a place, all in line with the parliamentary report on future high streets and town centres, which is our guiding light in terms of what town centres will look like in the future, to make sure that we're all aligned on that, as our business case will be examined on that basis. We're going to be progressing the Quick Wins project as per the programme that we've published, and the SOBC for Hickley's Corner. One other area that we're going to have a significant focus on is those cross-boundary issues. For example, the stance on car parking, the stance on public transport, working with Stagecoach to conduct a thorough review of the current service and how we can incentivize a higher take-up, and also the decarbonisation elements through electrification in the future. This all also ties in with Waverley and Surrey's ambition for the 2035 60% reduction in transport emissions as our sort of KPI. Next slide, please.
You want to?
I know that you can't really see that. However,
Paula, hang on. Paula, hang on. I think Jeremy wants to ask a question on your
slides.
No, I'm happy to wait until Paula's finished, Tim, and then I'll come in with
Okay, all right. Sure. Okay, thank you.
Sorry, Jeremy, I didn't spot that.
No problem.
You can't see this, but it was attached to our pack in terms of a summary program that shows our key milestones. We are keeping an eye on how we go basically from zero to delivering this entire program on site. I want to make sure that you're all aware that there are some assumptions and caveats that we've had. The bits in blue are everything that we've completed today. The bits in the dark purple is what's coming up. And in the pack that was issued, you'll be able to see the key dates in terms of how we're going to make this happen. Next slide, please. So it's important that you're aware that that schedule is based on a number of, it has a critical path, and it's based on a number of assumptions on areas that we don't know. So for example, the timing for funding from DFT, and there is currently a huge amount of emerging policy from them around how our, for example, the MRN and LLM schemes need to be responsive to their criteria. There's statutory processes, for example, around achieving planning, the land assembly complications, if there was any, around acquisition, and any compulsory purchase that we may be required. So at the moment, we've just made an arbitrary assessment on this, and we're beginning to look at the land matters as we speak. So again, we will be coming to the board to make you aware of any requirements in that space. Procurement and commissioning, which mustn't be forgotten as in terms of the mechanism of accessing the market and the timeline to access the right type of supply chain to then deliver this scheme, as well as the contracting forms. So how we will access the market in terms of a design and build delivery, for example, on the significant projects that we've got. And we're currently pulling together our strategy on how we will do that. And I also would like to raise it that we have a comprehensive risk register now with various high-level risks and issues that we've identified and quantified, and we're going to be bringing to the next board a look to the top risks for the programme for your consideration. The next slide. I think we're at the end. So I just wanted you to note all of that, and the fact that we have the new strands of work, which we potentially will amalgamate into our vision document and seek your approval to have as separate projects, and that we're going to now be doing these a series of workshops with our stakeholders around those cross-boundary issues, which a number of you have raised on the meeting today as well. So mainly there are active travel, walking and cycling, public transport, and on the carbon agenda. That's it. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Paula. Jeremy.
Tim, I wanted to make some kind of general comments about the programme as a whole. Is now the moment, or do you want me to wait?
Well, should we just take Simon then, because he might want to just say something to that. So Simon, do you want to go first, and then
I wasn't going to talk about the programme actually. I was just going to pick up on the point. Paula laboured the point, and Jonathan talked about it a lot. And it was just about buses and bus back better and bus service improvement plans. You may be aware that the Transport for the Southeast are carrying out area studies as we speak, and the emerging work from the studies that are ahead of the queue are all saying that the biggest bang for the buck in terms of value are all bus improvement schemes. So it's quite interesting that they're finding that that's the trend across the Southeast region.
Yeah, no, well, that's just, as you say, the county has to submit a letter, isn't it, by the end of June, I think, just in terms of the general approach to how we're going to look at buses, and then a more detailed plan in there. But I think, you know, what we need to try and access some of this funding. I mean, it's as simple as that. So having some schemes, defined schemes, will undoubtedly support that bid. Right then, yeah, I think unless there's anything else from you, Simon or Paula, Jeremy, do you want to pick up then?
Thanks, Tim. I just wanted to make some general comments. I mean, Paula, I thought that was an excellent presentation. Thank you. And thank you to you and to Jonathan and Richard for equally detailed and impressive presentations. I mean, I think my broad perspective is that we have never had this amount of love from Surrey for Farnham and this amount of attention. And so, of course, there are lots of frustrations. I think probably all of us in our hearts wish these things could happen 1,000 times more quickly. But actually, you know, this is very impressive. And Tim, thank you very much for that. And I would also just like to put on record my thanks to Wyatt and Stephen, who stepped down, because they have made a very important contribution into getting us where we are to date. I think the foundations are there. The consultation is very important. The quick wins are very important. But people in Farnham are very smart, and we have to be honest that there's going to be a lot of disruption ahead. And the vast majority of that disruption, as we start to implement these plans, will be temporary. But temporary isn't a matter of weeks. It's probably 1 to 2 years before new traffic patterns settle down, and people are going to find that very frustrating. And so, when we present these plans in September, I think it's really important that we're honest about the disruption. We're honest about what we expect the timelines around that disruption to be. I think we need to differentiate in these plans between what is a firm proposal that Surrey is willing to go ahead with and can fund, and what is an aspiration. So, you know, whether it's a Western Bypass or Hickley's Corner or Recklesham Bypass that we are still needing to secure funding for. But I think on top of all of that, we need some very measurable statistics about what improvements this will bring in terms of the changes in pollution, the decarbonisation of transport, and particularly important is to show these are benefits for the whole town, not just for the centre, so that people in Upper Hale and Recklesham and the Bourne all feel that they're part of this change. I want to sort of throw out a wildcat idea, and I haven't talked to anyone really in advance about this, but given that there is going to be this disruption, I'm just wondering whether the right thing we should do is present it to the town in September, show them the downsides, but also the upsides, some nice drawings that show where we're trying to head for. And then perhaps in early November, have a referendum where we ask the town whether they support this direction of travel. Now, I know in some quarters, referendums are a very, very bad word, but I do think that because there's going to be bumpiness ahead, it would give this group great self-confidence if we knew that we really did have the support of the town. I believe we will, but I don't want to prejudge that. And so I just wanted to put it on the table. And if we had that referendum result by the end of the year, I think that would, give us real momentum and oomph going forward. We have to specify very carefully what it is that you were voting for, because some of the things in this referendum are aspirations, not firm proposals. But I just wanted to put that thought out there and see what people thought.
Thank you, Jeremy. Before I add my thoughts, let's start with John.
Thank you, Chair. I'm very pleased to see what Jeremy's just said there. I think that's some good ideas there. I think that there is an enormous amount of work has been done on the whole communications front so far, and all the consultations, etc., etc. Fully accept all that, but I just think we're going to have to work even harder on that front, especially to get people to think more positively about adapting lifestyles and all these things towards modal shift, and recognizing the impacts of Climate Change Act and NIS 20, the infrastructure strategy. So I'd just like us to think a little bit more also about, further thoughts on communications package and messaging and everything else to boost what we're trying to do here and get people to understand what we're trying to do and get them on board. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Paul.
Thank you, Chair. As you can imagine, I'm not the most keenest on referenda as a concept, and I mostly consider them to be a bit of an abrogation of leadership, actually, from people, because it kind of gets you off the hook in a way, and really we're elected to kind of make the decisions, not to keep going back to people. However, it would be quite an interesting exercise, I think, certainly in the local democratic process. And the point I just wanted to raise was I will speak to Tom Hallwood about the mechanics and the cost of how that might actually work, because it will be Waverley that has to actually deliver that on the ground. So I'll take that away as an action.
Well, let's see whether we all agree with that first. Peter.
Sorry, apologies, Chair. You may agree or disagree, but the cost of running it and the mechanics of it, I imagine, would be material to that decision as well.
Well, yes, I'm just questioning whether that would be run by Waverley or by Surrey. Anyway, we'll come back to that in a minute. Let's just get some other views. Peter.
Thank you, Chair. Well, although I represent Waverley as a member of the board, I am a Farnham councillor, and I've lived in Farnham for more than 40 years. And we have been consulted to death. And the reason why things haven't gone forward is because we cannot agree. Apart from all the politics seem to have been sorted now, which is remarkable. But so I would agree. And I think what a referendum would do is not just give us a decision that we can that would support the programme, but it would actually bring the programme to the forefront, and it would engage with everybody in Farnham. I'm not sure how many people are aware of the Farnham infrastructure programme in Farnham. So this would really be a very good opportunity for a communication as well as a referendum. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Andy.
And thanks, Chairman. I think the idea, Jeremy, of a referendum is a good one. but I think we should only hold a referendum where we're certain we're going to win it, actually. And at the moment, I think it's slightly too early.
Is that how that works, Andy?
Yeah, absolutely. That's how the way we should be doing it. And that once we've done these quick wins, once we've got the effect of the HGV ban and all these good things and they're established and the population can see stuff really happening, once the Brightwells scheme starts working and we've got the link with Brightwells sorted out, it will be seen that the program's delivered stuff, because at the moment we'd be selling it on the vision as much as anything, and the vision's terrific actually, but that's a vision. And you get a lot of skepticism, and it hasn't been mentioned at the meeting so far, but the COVID measures have caused a lot of feeling in the town about what's happening, and they unfortunately get too much associated with this project and the OIP. So I think it's a good idea, Jeremy. I just think September's too early, or later this year's too early. We should do it, but do it when we're certain we're going to win it. So that's my comment, Jeremy. Good idea, but let's make sure we're going to win the referendum. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I think yeah, I think what Jeremy's saying, if I'm right, is what we would go out to residents where we have got specific plans that we would, we intend or we would like to implement, so that this isn't going back asking back over consulting or questions. Well, we've had a lot of feedback from the OIP. We kind of know now broadly what people think. We know what we want to do. We know what we can do. So I think this is a question for me, going out and getting that endorsement is absolutely essential, that what we do does have the broad support of residents. The mechanics of how we do this would need careful consideration, not just the questions, and we can't, with all due respect, cast the questions in a way that we're guaranteed to get the answer yes, because what we need to make sure that we've got full engagement across all age spectrums, because looking at the vision document, we very, very poor engagement with the younger community. So we need to do that. But I think what this is about, reminding ourselves why we want to do this. Starting with the pollution summit that Jeremy set up. This is about improving air quality. It is about reducing traffic flow in the town. It is about restoring it back to a time when it isn't just a gridlocked town. I mean, I think my concern, and you all heard this from me before, is that particularly now we're starting to see the volumes of traffic increasing as the restrictions sort of start to fall away. You are all getting constant harassment from residents, understandably, about gridlock. Now, some of those things we can address by perhaps rescheduling planned roadworks. The emergency roadworks, I'm afraid, are largely out of our hands, but the introduction of the lane rental that we brought in April, I think will encourage utility companies to get on and do the work more speedily. But Andy, I think where we landed collectively in relation to the COVID measures were that we will remove them from the borough as soon as we can. And then we will address the disabled parking bay issue on Castle Street, but we will look to leave them in Castle Street and in Downing Street with a view to moving forward with the widening of the pavements and so on. So I think that there is a hearts and minds here that we absolutely have to win, and I think if we don't go back to residents now saying this is all the work that we have done, this is what it's showing, this is what it tells us. You have told us, this is some data, objective data that supports the reasons why we will move forward with these proposals, and get them to say, hopefully, yes. I think if we don't do that, we will justifiably be criticised. So I think there is. I think the practicalities of how we do that we can take offline and work through it. But I think conceptually. This is not seeking yet another consultation. It's about just getting their endorsement for these plans. Okay, so Paul, a quick comment from you, and then Jeremy, and then we'll move forward. We'll wrap
Thanks,
up.
Tim.
Okay.
I think you and Peter actually covered most of what I was going to say. So one thing left to say is that the statutory process for us to apply for funding requires us to engage with communities and have those public consultations anyway. So whether there is a referendum in practice or, we are going to have some sort of that exercise anyway, and we won't get any funding if we can't demonstrate that engagement. What I think is really important in all of this, and Peter alluded to that, is that the board needs to be on the same frequency on what we're going to achieve. Otherwise, the program will stall, and we've seen that, time and time again elsewhere. So that consistency of approach between us all here is really important. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you, Paul. That's very helpful. And the final word from Jeremy.
Thanks so much, Tim. I mean, I very much agree with what Peter said. I think we shouldn't exaggerate in our minds the extent to which people in Farnham actually do know all the work that we've been doing, much as it seems a lot of work to us. So a referendum is a good way of really engaging people if you're asking people to make a decision. I do have experience of this in Farnham because I organised the 2014 referendum, which was about a pedestrianisation scheme where we scraped through with 51% of the vote. And one of the lessons I took from that exercise was that you have to be very clear in a referendum what it is you're asking people. And people, most of the 49% who voted against actually weren't against transforming the town centre, but they thought that I was proposing a specific scheme, when what I was really trying to do was to get support for the principle. I think if we do this referendum towards the end of this year, I think we're asking really for four things. We're asking, do you support the vision, which people haven't been directly asked since it's been formulated? Do you want to go ahead with the quick wins? Do you want to do the things that we know we're going to do in stage one, which is primarily in the town centre, and it's based on what the traffic studies tell us this September, and we don't quite know what that is, whether it's a partial pedestrianisation of some roads, not others, but anyway, something concrete that's going to reduce the pollution in the town centre that we think we want to go. And then the fourth thing you're asking is to proceed with consultation on all the other stages, the big road projects but there would be, if you like, still a chance for people to register objections to those other schemes at a later stage. I think you have to be quite specific as to what you're asking people, but I think if you do that, I'm a bit more confident than Andy because of the responses we saw to the consultation earlier, where I felt it was broadly 2-1 in favour of doing something, but then I was on the losing side of the Brexit referendum, so I can't say I always get my judgments right on these things.
But we have to recognise that if we go out to a referendum and we ask the residents the question, we have to live with the answer. So okay, then Paul, you want to?
Yeah, sorry, very, very quickly. I'm not going to make this political, but I just want to make the point that this should be a proper local authority run referendum rather than one run by any particular political party. I think then it would have more legitimacy and support anyway.
Yeah, well, I hadn't taken that it was going to be run by any political party. I'm rather assuming that it will be a referendum that the three local authorities will collaborate on. It. All I was commenting on is the practicalities, the logistics of who runs that. But I mean, the referendum will be, on the basis that all three local authorities agree. I mean, if Waverley want to pay for it, happy with that.
I'm sure Waverley will have to run it. Whether we'll want to pay for it is something I can't answer here, Tim. But
all right. Well, we'll pick up the practicalities outside of this meeting. But I think there seems to be broad agreement that actually going back to our residents to seek their endorsement on the specific plans makes sense. So we'll take that offline and we'll kind of work up something in a bit more detail for circulation and comment in due course. Good. Okay. Well, that's a lot of detail. I mean, I hope everybody feels reassured that we continue to move forward at pace. I mean, accepting that we would all like to have this done, as Jeremy says, tomorrow. We've got to get this right. There's a whole jigsaw here to to bring together. So, but let's get these quick wins certainly move forward. You know, and I think that will be that will really be beneficial in terms of residents starting to see us actually delivering on the ground, which is what this is all about. So thank you all very much for your contributions and attendance. The date of the next meeting is 24th of September 21, but of course there will be, I'm sure, many conversations between now and then in any event. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, Tim. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Tim. See you soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.